Hello, everyone. My name is Samir Benderson, and I'm a consultant working closely with the African American Diabetes Association, AADA. Thank you to those who attended AADA's last workshop with Dr. Oke as we discussed the importance of movement. Tonight, we have a special workshop as we welcome those on Facebook, the O'Aces Barbershop Watch Party in Roxbury, Massachusetts, and others who are joining us via Zoom as we have a conversation about Black men and diabetes with Dr. Stanley Andrisse, an endocrinologist and author, and Leon Rock, a co-founder and CEO of the African American Diabetes Association. However, before I introduce our speakers for tonight a little more, I want to ask those watching on Zoom, please be in gallery view and have your camera on so we can see your wonderful faces. Also, to let people know the workshop is live on Facebook, being recorded, and will go on AADA's YouTube channel shortly. During the Zoom, everyone will be muted. However, if you have questions, I'll be monitoring all chats, including the Facebook live chat. If you want to stay in contact with AADA, please write your email in the chat or direct message AADA on Zoom or Facebook. And without further ado, I'd like to introduce our speakers for tonight. First, starting with our special guest, Dr. Stanley Andrisse, an endocrinologist scientist and professor at Howard University College of Medicine and author of the book From Prison Cell to PhD. Dr. Stanley Andrisse is a remarkable example of a resilient and determination. After being incarcerated, he went on to become a successful endocrinologist scientist and professor at Howard University College of Medicine. His book, From Prison Cell to PhD, is a testament to his journey and a source of inspiration for many. AADA is delighted to have Dr. Andrisse with us this evening. Also, I'll let him dive deeper into his life because my synopsis barely scratches the surface of his extraordinary story. Joining us this evening is also a co-founder and CEO of AADA, Leon Rock. Leon holds a master's education from the University of Massachusetts College of Public and Community and a master's degree from Cambridge College. Leon grew up in Orchard Park and Academy Homes in Roxbury, which is home and familiar to many of those with us this evening. Leon says, we have to build our own institutions. One of the critical purposes of the African American Diabetes Association is to educate African Americans and the general public and to provide culturally tailored healthcare interventions to improve diabetes care of Black folks. AADA is pleased to have him at the helm, and I'm pleased to be working closely with him. That said, I'd like to turn over the mic to our speakers with the question to kick off this evening's conversation. What is your life journey? Most specifically, how did you find yourself working to address diabetes? Dr. Andrisse, please go first.
Yeah, so first I just want to offer immense thank you to the African American Diabetes Association and Leon Rock, who I had the pleasure of meeting in person at an event held at Howard University. And, this is one of the results of that just about a few short months ago. After learning about the great work being done by Leon and his team. So thank you everyone. It's a pleasure to be here. So a little bit more about my journey to studying diabetes as an endocrinologist scientist. It's a very non-traditional path. So I am, as was being mentioned, a formerly incarcerated person with 3 felony convictions. I was sentenced to 10 years in prison as a prior and persistent career criminal. I had a prosecutor pushing for 20 years to life in prison because she felt that I had no hope for changing the decisions that I had been making up until that time in my early 20s. Fast forward some time, I did my time. I'm now, as was mentioned, Dr. Stanley Andrisse, an endocrinologist scientist, assistant professor at Howard University College of Medicine, the mecca of historically Black colleges and universities. I say that with all love and respect for all HBCUs and what they mean to this country, but special respect to my home institution, Howard, with it being the #1 producer of Black and brown medical doctors and PhD holders. I also was at Johns Hopkins for a little bit as an adjunct faculty and did my endocrinology fellowship there. And I hold visiting professorship visiting faculty at Georgetown Medicine and also Didn't think I was hustling strong enough, so I took it across the pond and did a summer sabbatical at Imperial College London in their endocrinology division. So with all of that, I clearly didn't live up to this prosecutor's expectations that I was going to be this career criminal and was, in her eyes, deserving of a life sentence. But to tell you a little bit more about my journey. So I'm originally from the Ferguson, Missouri area. So growing up in that area, I got involved in making poor decisions at a young age. I started selling drugs before I was even a teenager. I was arrested for the first time at 15. I moved into the juvenile system and continued making poor decisions till I was sitting in that courtroom facing 20 years to life in prison in my early 20s. And, when I was sentenced to prison, I went in very much feeling like I was going to be in this revolving door of incarceration. I was fortunate enough to have this mentor step into my life that saw a different trajectory. That tied with over the course of the first 2 years I was incarcerated, my father became very ill, and he had a number, he was in and out of the hospital and had multiple surgeries and amputations, and ended up losing his battle with type 2 diabetes. And it was during this like emotional, stressful time that I started studying diabetes and endocrinology. And I read my first scientific article on diabetes during this time. And it was more so, I had no idea that it was going to take me to sitting in front of you here today and being faculty at Howard University College of Medicine. It was more of this coping mechanism. I come from an immigrant family, the youngest of 5 kids, and my family losing my dad was this difficult thing that I wanted to be a part of somehow. So I thought that I could read and learn and kind of help in that way. But what it actually did for me was, although my body was locked in this physical cell, my mind was roaming around the human cell. And in that way, I was able to escape prison in a way. And that was the changing point for me in terms of seeing myself differently. I can certainly talk a little bit more about the journey, but that led me into eventually applying to a number of schools and getting rejected from all of them except for St. Louis University, where this mentor was on the admissions committee, and it was kind of a wrap from there. And I'll pause and pass it to you.
Well, thank you very much. And wow, what a journey that has been. I've heard some of what you said in your presentation in Washington, D.C. over at Howard University, HU. But at the same time, I've learned some new things as well, Doctor. Let me tell you, I've had pretty much an equal challenge to you, not as equal in the sense of incarceration, but the challenges have been great. And one of the things that I learned in learning about diabetes, I learned about it at an early age, or let us call it a mid-age. When I learned about diabetes, it was like, well, I knew about it as a kid, because we all heard the word sugar. He has the sugar. It was either an uncle or an aunt, a grandmother or a grandfather, even a brother or sister or father or mother, but it was someone in the family that had the sugar. And I knew people in my family that had what is called the sugar at the time, but now we know it as diabetes. And I was having the experience of diabetes some 20 years ago. And in my experience with diabetes, and I'm not going to discuss any other organizations, but I will say that one of the major organizations wasn't doing enough with regards to diabetes in the African-American community. Similar to what happens with historically white universities, we had to build historically Black universities to address our own need. And when I started looking out some 20 years ago about diabetes, I learned that, the organization that was established to address diabetes actually was formed back in the 1930s. And in the 1930s, there was legal segregation. And they had this segregationist approach to diabetes and addressing diabetes, particularly in low income and African American communities. I said, we got to do something different and we have to establish our own organization. I'm a type 2 diabetic. I've had the challenges of dealing with type 2 diabetes, but I'll tell you one thing, one institution has stood the test of time for me in addressing my diabetes, and that's Howard University. Yes, and its diabetes center has been able to assist me in addressing my own diabetes because guess what? They know what is important for the African American community. So I'm just here to say, Doc, I appreciate you in the work that you're doing in relationship to diabetes, but there's one thing I have to ask you, Doc, is what is diabetes? Because a whole bunch of people still are understanding diabetes as hereditary only. And so what is diabetes and what is the makeup? You're the researcher on this stuff. So tell us, what is diabetes?
Yeah, so thank you for that introduction of your journey to creating such a much needed organization. So it's interesting with my family is Haitian, so we called it sugar as well, sucre in Haitian, and I knew about it from a kid as well, even before I got incarcerated and my dad became ill, but I didn't know that it was the devastation that it causes. I learned it firsthand in seeing what it was doing to my dad. But diabetes is, one of the very simple things is high blood sugar, right? So we know, and we could I'll talk a little bit about type 1 versus type 2. So when a person eats a meal, their blood sugar goes up. And when their blood sugar goes up in an individual who doesn't have complications of diabetes, their insulin level goes up after the meal. And their insulin, I explain it as they go to certain tissues, they go to certain cells in the body, and they knock on the door and they say, hey, there's a bunch of glucose out here. Do you mind opening the door and letting some glucose in? And a healthy individual who doesn't suffer from diabetes, they say, oh yeah, like come on in, and glucose comes in and blood glucose goes down. In individuals with diabetes, particularly, for instance, type 2 diabetes, a person eats a meal, their blood glucose goes up, insulin goes up as well, but insulin goes to the door of those cells and it starts knocking on the door, and it's as if this party is going on inside. And like the music is bumping and like no one can hear insulin knocking on the door. So what actually happens, insulin then sends like more people and they're like doing a police knock on the door, and still the party is going on, and so they can't hear it. And that what I'm explaining is something called insulin resistance. So insulin in type 2 diabetics, they have something called insulin resistance where insulin's banging on the door, but there's this huge party going on and no one can hear it. So the blood glucose levels stay high, and that's bad for the body. Just the insight into what I actually study as a researcher, like a detective, I investigate like who is causing all the ruckus in the party. So like my research is actually looking at who's causing all the problems in the party that making no one be able to hear insulin knocking at the door. So I've discovered that person who's making all the problems, and we've used something called some genetic manipulations to where we can get rid of that person. And now we're looking at medications that basically get rid of just that person. And now when insulin knocks at the door, there's a little party going on, but it's not crazy. And so they hear and they open the door and let glucose in. Type 1 diabetics, their blood glucose goes up after a meal, and there's an organ called the pancreas that is just, the body has attacked the cells of the pancreas and destroyed the cells that release insulin. So insulin doesn't even get released. And as a lot of people commonly know, there are diabetics that have to take insulin shots. And, type 1 diabetics particularly have to take insulin shots because their pancreas has been destroyed by something called like its own body. It's an autoimmune disease.
Oh, that's pretty interesting stuff. I like the way you characterized it and explained it in a simple way, and actually in a way that Black folks can understand. There's something going on. There's a party going on, and we want to make sure that that party has the right people in it. And yeah, let me pose another question to you, Doc. With regards to type 1, you've explained it. Type 2, you've explained it. But what about gestational diabetes? What is that? What is gestational diabetes? And did I say it right?
Yeah. So gestational diabetes is actually, we know a good deal about what causes, we know exactly what causes type 1. We have a very good understanding of what causes type 2, and we can talk a little bit about who let that crazy person into the party that's doing all the crazy stuff. And, so we know who that person is. But with gestational diabetes, we don't quite know why people get it. We have some pretty good ideas, and genetics and environment are said to play a role, but we'll get into a question, I believe, about race. Of course, race plays a role, and I'll explain why race and ethnicity plays a role. But in these individuals, women with gestational diabetes, it's oftentimes because they have not had the best diet during their pregnancy, or there are these things that I wanted to save a little bit of that conversation, but there's these things called epigenetics that are like these environmental factors that play a role into causing problems. So like poor air quality. And we know that certain communities are susceptible to being around like factories, for instance. And we know all about Detroit, for instance, and Flint, with their water and what happened. So there are these types of environmental things that can cause changes in a woman's pregnancy that makes them that lets that person into the party. So then their cells become insulin resistant. Insulin's knocking on the door, and they can't hear insulin.
Oh, okay, very good. Now, explain, why is it that, let's get back to Black men now. I did want to put in that Black woman issue or gestational diabetes, but let's get back to Black men. And why is it that Black men, I read the data constantly, almost every day, and I read the data showing that Black men in particular have a high incidence of diabetes. Is there a reason why Black men compared to other groups of individuals have a high incidence of diabetes, and what is the cause?
Yeah, so Black men actually have a 60% more likelihood of developing diabetes than their white male counterparts. And there are a number of factors that play into it. I really wanted to address one that is kind of this newer thing that I'm really putting a lot of emphasis behind, and really looking to get more research out from my particular lab, but really encourage the field to be thinking about it in this way. So I'm going to kind of focus on this, but it's kind of a multitude of factors. And so one of the things is socioeconomic status, right? So race is an interesting thing, and not to get into that whole what is race, but what is race? Like race, you've probably heard it before. It's this like social construct, but let's step away from that conversation to not dive deep, because that could be a long conversation. When we just think about what race has done in the United States in terms of creating concentrations of poverty, so people of certain races have been concentrated into areas of poverty and lack of resources, lack of food, food deserts, and lack of education to really understand how to better treat diabetes and manage diabetes and other complications. So there's the socioeconomic status. There's what I was mentioning earlier with socioeconomic status, the fact that income will determine if you live closer to a factory or closer to an area that has poor water quality or poor air quality. And all of those things play a role into this thing that I'm about to talk about. This idea of something called epigenetics. When I first learned about it, it literally blew my mind, because, I started learning about what DNA is and genetics. Like, we have this thing called DNA. It's like what makes me look like my dad and my mom, right? Mm-hmm. It's passed down from my mom and my dad, and I look like them, right? And I have these features in them. Mm-hmm. Well, epigenetics is this thing that wasn't part of your mom and dad, but yet now it's part of your DNA and you're passing it on to your children. And the way epigenetics happens is there are these environmental factors that come in and they rearrange certain things associated with DNA, something called chromatin. And it literally, without it having been part of your family's genetic DNA material, it is now part of your family's genetic DNA material for the rest of your family's lineage. And so I take that a step even further, is when we think, so what that says is, living in Flint, Michigan, your family may have not ever had any genetic problems that predispose you to diabetes. But because you've been drinking the Flint water, you've now changed your DNA to where now the rest of your family lineage is susceptible to diabetes. And I take that a step further and I think about slavery. So when you think about the environmental trauma and damage that slavery did, now when you introduce it to some white individuals and white people, there's this term called white fragility. When you start talking about race and racism, they say, hold on, like, my family, I've done the history. My family never engaged in race, in slavery and all this type of thing. And slavery was 200 years ago. Like, how could it possibly be impacting you now? And what I'm saying is epigenetics. Like, there's literal physiological data that says if you are succumb to these environmental traumas, it literally changes your DNA. And that gets passed down to your kids. So, one of the things, it's environmental factors, but I take it a step further. These environmental factors are getting passed down to our kids, our grandkids, our great grandkids. So the trauma that this country's putting us through, it's gonna, like, my great grandkids are gonna literally physiologically feel that. I'm giving them diabetes because I'm living in poverty. It's crazy.
That is a fact, and I'm learning more. Epigenetics, environmental factors, chromatin. Is that how you say it? Chromatin.
Yeah.
Black folks need to know these languages, these words, because it's critical as we have conversations. Actually, by the way, there's conversations going on right now in Boston, Massachusetts, in California, and places in between with regards to not just diabetes, but actually what needs to be done for the African-American communities around America because of slavery and its impact on slavery, and actually beyond slavery, the impact of these, actually in many ways, chromatin.
Yep.
This is amazing stuff that you're giving to the people. I'm hoping that the folks at the barbershop are listening to this, because this is pretty interesting stuff. But I want to bring it down to even a closer level in terms of your own personal experience, talking about diabetes, not just in the big African-American community, but there's a smaller but big African-American community that is incarcerated. Those brothers and sisters seem to get nothing or limited resource with regards to their challenge with diabetes. Talk about what you know about diabetes in the criminal injustice system, I'm going to call it. I understand, and you know better than I, the statistics. 1 out of 3 Black men in America have had some impact in the criminal injustice system. We are there in numbers. We go there, we come out. We go there, we come out. Sometimes 7 or 8 times before we kind of sort of get our act together, or the county or city or the police departments get their act together. What you thinking? What is going on with diabetes in the prison?
Yeah, you know, as you mentioned, the US incarcerates more people than any other country in the entire world. We incarcerate at a rate, you know, 5 to 10 times higher than places that are constantly in the news, like Russia, North Korea, places that, you know, China, places that we see as having backwards politics, or that they treat their people in this cruel manner. We incarcerate way more than they do. Not only do we incarcerate more, we have the highest rate of solitary confinement, which by United Nations standards, they consider that to be a means of torture. So we're literally torturing our people more than any other country in the world in this manner. But the news never spins it this way. And then you tie that fact to what you just mentioned, that 1 in 3 Black men, which is 6 times the rate of white male counterparts. Black women are also 6 times more likely to be incarcerated, and Black women are actually the highest growing population of incarcerated people. But when you tie that, you know, the numbers that we incarcerate the most, we have the highest rate of solitary confinement. What does that mean? That means we're incarcerating this insane amount of Black bodies. We have this insane amount of Black and people of color that we lock in cages in this country. And then you tie that to the diabetes epidemic that we're talking about. And, you know, we started to talk about how it's a higher prevalent in the Black communities. So, you know, naturally you can see that the prevalence of diabetes inside incarceration is highest amongst Black individuals. And one of the challenges that the system faces, that you know, just in my case, that the prosecutor was pushing for life in prison, and I got 10 instead. But there are so many people. We went through this phase in our history where we were giving out life sentences. Life sentences essentially became the modern day noose. So they stopped hanging Black folks in the middle of the street and instead started giving them life sentences and these 20, 30, 40, 50-year sentences. So Black individuals go into prison at this young age. And the problem that we're facing around diabetes is they don't have, you know, they go in at 17, 18, 20, 25, and they don't have complications of diabetes, and they never get screened. So then they go through 2 decades of never getting any type of information about this thing that happens to individuals over time, particularly if you're not paying attention to what you're eating. And in prison, you know, because the food is terrible, oftentimes the food that they provide on commissary is just junk. It's all junk. One crazy thing that I always mention about my incarceration experience is that in prison, I can go to the canteen and I can get 10 boxes of Little Debbie's or 10 cartons of tobacco, but I was only allowed 3 books in my cell. So the prison system was saying, go ahead, get diabetes, go ahead and get lung cancer, but heaven forbid you get educated, right? So they actually promote you eating unhealthy. So then people go through these periods of eating unhealthy and there's no screening going on. So, people will end up developing diabetes and it actually goes undiagnosed. And it's not until they're needing amputations and certain complications that are at this stage that I mentioned with my father, which is very much a stage that is hard to come back from. So the situation in prisons is that it's going undiagnosed until it's too severe to really, help the individual maintain a quality, a normal quality of life.
Why should Black America be concerned about those that are in the criminal system, be in jail for many years? Why should Black folks be concerned about their health? Talk to us about that. Why should we be concerned? Why should Roxbury, Dorchester, Mattapan, Boston, Massachusetts, Black folks, Black men in Boston be concerned about folks that are in prison and diabetic?
Yeah, that's a great question. The statistics say that out of the 2 million plus people who are incarcerated, about 95% of them will come back to the community at some point in time. So these individuals are coming back to our society, and they're our brothers, they're our sisters, they're our fathers, they're our mothers. So one, they're going to be coming back to your family, potentially your community or your family. And so they will be a financial burden because they'll come out and, not have health insurance or quality health insurance, and will rely on family and community to be cared for. So when we look at it from the perspective of it's going to be a burden on our health system and on the family and community system, from that perspective, you would want to care about it. But I look at it from the humanistic perspective. Why would we be literally letting people rot? Like, if you've never seen diabetic necrosis of the foot, like, don't Google it. It's hard to look at. Right. And, you got folks incarcerated who are getting to that stage of the condition and not getting the proper care. So, it's just a humanistic thing that we should care about it.
Yeah, we agree on that. Actually, that was a rhetorical question, obviously.
Yeah.
I care, you care, we all should care about our brothers and sisters that are incarcerated. But equally as much, we should care about those people that find themselves economically challenged with addressing the diabetes issue. In Boston's Black community, the value of a family, and this is not all Black families, but data shows that the value of a Black family in Boston in terms of dollars and cents is $8. That is the amount of money that folks in my hometown of Roxbury have in terms of their economic wealth. Versus in the white community of Boston, the average is $250,000, $250,000. This is data, that is fact. So with that data, along with the data of the average income in my hometown of Roxbury is $25,000 per year. But the average housing is about $2,500 for a 2-bedroom apartment in Boston. $25,000 a year. average amount of value to a person's or a family is $8 gross. We got a challenge, and the challenge is great. How do, and then we have the situation with diabetes and diabetes supplies. Everybody's making money, and it appears that no one cares. What should the African-American community in Boston and around the country be doing to address this dilemma we find ourselves in?
Yeah, it's a multifaceted plan that really involves systemic change. I mean,
Mhm.
I can certainly talk about some things that we could talk about from the individual, but from a systems level, we need to address some of the issues of what you just mentioned in terms of the economic divide and gap, the income gap that you just, mentioned is, what are ways that we can help with that? When I think specifically of what that income gap does, as I was kind of mentioning with these concentrated areas of poverty and creating food deserts, I think, from a that's something. So a lot of these things with the economic gap takes, I think, policy change. And so there's ways that you can get involved to help try to make those types of changes. But some things, for instance, that don't take policy change is, Whole Foods, investing in communities of color, and corporate entities investing in communities of colors to reduce food deserts. So these corporations don't need to wait for policies to come around to change their pricing schemes, to change their model, at least for certain areas, to where Whole Foods can be priced at this place in this area, but then you can put that type of food quality in this area and change your pricing scheme. So as a corporation, if you really wanted to do that, you can do that. You don't need to wait till policies to come around. So I think, corporate, big corporations, particularly when I think of like food chains, grocery store, that provide healthy options for individuals. When you think about diabetes, one of the biggest challenges in areas of poverty, and because of that economical divide that you mentioned, is that businesses that provide healthy foods are not in these areas because they don't care. I mean, it would be interesting to have a conversation with like an exec from a Whole Foods, because how could you be sitting and watching what's going on in these communities and be sitting on all your money and not want to make a change in your model to
That's right.
to really address? And I mean, a corporation like that can make big change with just dropping stores all over the country in these concentrated areas of poverty, throughout the US.
We agree on that. So the next question I have for you is, what can we do as individuals, and men in particular, Black men in particular, that have pre-diabetes or diabetes? What are the changes that are necessary for a pre-diabetic, and what are the changes that are necessary for a diabetic moving forward? So as someone learns about the fact that, oh, wow, my blood sugar level is running high and I need to do something about it, what is it that they need to do? The same thing with
Yeah.
a diabetic. What is it that a diabetic needs to do to change their lifestyle? Is there a lifestyle change necessary?
Yeah. So when I think of this, I always Tupac pops into my mind, and I
Mhm.
I think of his song called Changes. And he has a part in the song where he says, we have to change the way we eat, we have to change the way we think, we have to change. So and then an interest, then the hook jumps in and he says, still I see no changes. And it was kind of this powerful message where he said we need to change all these things, speaking directly to the Black community and kind of the community at large. But then he ties it into still I see no changes.
Mhm.
And so I say to, still I see no changes. Like, we need to be able to see that um, you know, move away from some of the traditional, like find new foods that are incorporated into what is a traditional, foods that are found in Black communities. I mean, when you think about like the amount of different sauces that are put on certain foods, the emphasis that there is in the perception, at least on Black people, and fried foods and fried chicken, like, and then where Tupac comes into my head is like, when you go to a party and your homeboy has like an air fryer or something like that, he prepared it a little bit differently. Like, you need to be prepared to change the way you're thinking about that. Are you gonna spit out a comment that makes him or her less likely to make that dish again? And I mean, it's little things about understanding the perceptions of like how we eat, and how we think about food and what we think of as good food is one thing. And then just managing our health and knowing, like, trying to incorporate healthy habits of like exercise and taking a longer route to parking at the farthest parking spot, to where you walk longer to get in, walking all the way up the steps. So
And
you incorporate just in your daily activities. It's not even, you may not have time to get to the gym, but instead of taking the elevator, take the steps. And so there's little ways that you could think about incorporating more activity into your day. But then, I mean, a big thing is really thinking about your dietary and eating habits and your perceptions around them. So I think we just individually need to really think about that as a Black community.
I agree. And so you're saying that we need to slow down or moderate our food intake. As an example, I know in the African American community, everybody wants to, actually, there's a contest to some degree, who makes the best mac and cheese. And they throw everything but the kitchen sink into the mac and cheese. And, some people love mac and cheese, others are laying back on it, but it's something that historically has been a soul food in the African-American community. Are you essentially saying that we should limit the amount of soul food? Or are we?
I think
Yes.
it's up to, I think it's up to innovation. So I think, to the young creative chefs and people, the people that are attracted into the culinary arts, food trucks are becoming a popular thing, and fusions are becoming a popular thing, where you can fuse
Yeah,
what's
can
up,
you
fellas? How you doing?
mute? Yes, and they're here. And could you mute, please?
So yeah, I think becoming innovative and creative, and I think it's upon folks in the culinary arts to really not leave or move away from the soul food, but find new ways of preparing it where you still have the same taste, feeling, and enjoyment, but it's not the kitchen sink. It's like a very curated amount of what you put in there. And then moderation is really the other big thing. Like, even if you are not changing the recipe up, moderation is the challenging thing.
Very good. And you see, you see people in the background over at the barbershop, and they're enjoying themselves listening to you. And this gives me a segue to a degree. I see a couple of folks there, a number of people waving their hands, and we're waving back at them. Is there any questions that the brothers want to ask of Dr. Stan? I think Brother Anthony Banks is there. Brother Banks is there, and Barbara King. Hello, Barbara King. And take yourself off of mute And if you have a question for Dr. Stan, I'm sure he'll be glad to listen in and answer your question. So go right ahead. Brother Banks?
Can you hear me?
We can
Yes.
hear you.
Okay, thank you. Brother Dr. Andrisse, thank you so much for taking the time to join us in this very important moment. We have brothers, we have several brothers here at O'Aces Barbershop here in Roxbury, Massachusetts, and they've been getting a lot of information from you, doctor, and they said you're an amazing guy. And so we just thank you for taking the time to be here with us and to spreading the knowledge. Please understand it is not falling on deaf ears. All these brothers have been listening intently. We have my good brother, the owner of the barbershop right here. How you doing? He's here, and he opened his shop so that brothers could come out in the community to hear from an expert like yourself.
Thank you. Thank you.
Thank you. Do you have a question? Is there any questions that?
Yeah, the question I have is, can we continue to do this? Can we continue to do these kinds of events in and around the community? Because these kinds of things are so desperately needed. And what, in your opinion, Dr. Andrisse, what is going to be the need in the next 5 years or so for diabetes care in and around the Black community? One of the things that the brothers here talked about was, they get tired of sticking their fingers with, and trying to get blood to put on their machines and test and everything. And I was explaining to them that, one of the reasons that the African American Diabetes Association is doing these things is to inform people about the various advancements in technology that exist, so that people can make use of the technology so that it'll be easier to manage their diabetes. So could you just kind of speak to the advancements of technology and the things that we can do as a community to take advantage of the things that are currently available for folks to manage their diabetes?
Yeah, that's a great question. And I mean, to answer the kind of last part, and before I add something else to the beginning part of what you asked, the last part about advancements and the pricking of fingers and how that can become challenging after so many times your fingers, it's hard to do. There are advancements that will auto test. There's actually a good number of them where it's very rather non-invasive in terms of no pricking at all, and it's able to just monitor without actually even any type of injection into your into your skin. And there's of course there's pumps that come along with that monitoring that can auto deliver insulin based on the blood sugar levels. So I think that is a conversation around access. So I think it's one, education. It's knowing these newer technologies exist, but then oftentimes the reason that they're shielded from certain communities is because they're non-accessible in terms of cost. So I think we need to do a better job of getting the cost of these new technologies at a reasonable price to make them more accessible. I think you're muted.
He's talking.
You're still muted.
But you're muted.
There you go.
Can you hear me now?
Yes.
I myself, being a diabetic, I went to get some. Thank you. God bless you, brother. God bless you. Hey. Wants to say thank you, man.
Hey, I love you guys, and I hope next time you'll invite me again to one of your things.
Absolutely.
I love you guys. Okay. So next time I have fun, I'll come down here and invite you.
Will do.
Next time I'm in the area, I'm gonna come check you guys out.
God bless you. God bless you, brother.
You have a good one.
You too, my brother. Take care.
Tell him I'm the 300-pound guy.
That's right. This guy used to be 300 pounds, man. And he lost all his weight. He lost all his weight.
I went from insulin to taking my metformin. I don't have to take insulin no more.
Yep.
Hey, tell us how you did it, man.
310 pounds.
Yes, sir.
Wait. Anthony, ask him how he did it. Explain how he did it.
How do you do it?
Explain how
Eating
you did.
healthy and staying away from the bad foods.
That's it.
Very good.
So what do you
That's
do
it.
when you go to it? What do you do when you go to the
Listen.
family barbecue or the neighborhood barbecue? And
Listen,
they
I go to family barbecue, I still struggle every day. I just pick and nick.
God bless you, brother.
God bless you.
brother.
Thank you for having me here.
Yes, sir. Yes,
Thank
sir. God bless you. Yeah, man. So this has just been an amazing time here at Barbershop, brothers. You have no idea. And all these brothers were here and they were really listening intently. But as I was saying, I was saying, you know, I went to get one of these new systems, and the technology is so crazy. They ordered me only a part of the system, so I couldn't even use none of the system. They had the doctor wrote me a prescription for the reader, but didn't write me a prescription for the other part of the supply. So I couldn't use any of it. So now it's been like almost 3 weeks waiting on them to get their act together to get both of the parts of the prescription so that I can utilize this newer technology. But that's just a small portion of the kind of things that we in the Black community go through when we try and take advantage of the new technology, and some of our suppliers or providers are kind of slow on the uptake when it comes to dealing with Black folks in the Black community.
Yeah, one thing that I wanted to add that I didn't touch on is stress management and thinking about stress. So one really interesting aspect. So I like to tie, when I think about these things, a lot of times the researchers, because the researchers that are doing it aren't primarily Black, is one problem with research. We need more people of color in research. But what there's an interesting thing about stress. There's something called Cushing syndrome, and if you tie certain life experiences to there's something called the O'Aces test. So I don't know if you've heard of O'Aces. It's adverse childhood experiences. So if you have a lot of bad childhood trauma, this makes you more susceptible to get diabetes, and it makes you more susceptible to this condition called Cushing's. But what's interesting about that, so we're, again, these concentrated areas of poverty that have high levels of O'Aces, a lot of childhood trauma, it's literally programming the Black community to get diabetes later. Even with your best efforts, you can still have the challenges. So I wanted to add in the aspect of mental health. So one of the ways to reduce Cushing's is it's a condition that has high cortisol. So it has this hormone called cortisol that's literally making you more susceptible to diabetes. You can lower that just by lowering your stress. And I want to mention it, before we jump off, because mental health is such a taboo thing in the Black community. But just literally like taking time to take personal care. So we talked a lot about eating habits and exercise and activity, but really taking care of your personal mental health can lower your risk of developing diabetes, because it will lower your cortisol levels, and it can help you manage like years of trauma that led to you having higher stress levels and cortisol levels.
Wow, that's very good. Anthony, are you still there? Yes, and thank you very much for the question, and thank you, Doctor, for that phenomenal answer. We have just a few minutes left to talk about diabetes and Black men. I think, Anthony, you've added a unique perspective, particularly around your own diabetes. Can you answer a question for me, Anthony? And that is, how long have you been a diabetic? And what has that challenge been? How has it been for you with this challenge of diabetes?
Well, I've been a diabetic for, oh my God, probably close to 15 to 18 years, I think. It first came upon me. I used to work as a cardiac catheterization radiologic technologist at Mass General Hospital, doing interventional cardiology. And I would have to get up as an interventional cardiology technologist. I would have to get up in the middle of the night sometimes because I was on call, and to go in and perform heart procedures, angiography and interventional angiography on people who are having heart attacks. Well, one day I just, I went in, I was feeling terrible all night. I was on call and I was feeling terrible, and I was hoping that I didn't get called in because I felt so bad. When beeper went off, of course, and I had to run into the hospital. When I got there, I was feeling so bad. I was lethargic. I was low energy. And my colleagues looked at me and said, "Are you okay?" And I said, "Yeah, I'm okay." Well, not really, but I just, I feel terrible. And they said, "You don't look good." And so one of the nurses said, "Let me check your blood sugar." And she checked my blood sugar, and man, my blood sugar was like 600, and yeah, I was doing it. And so, they immediately put me on a stretcher and took me down to the emergency room, and they stuck an IV in me and gave me some fluids. Oh, okay, we're done in like 2 minutes. And they gave me fluids, and I ended up being in the hospital for like 4 days at that point. Getting diagnosed and getting the knowledge that you're a diabetic and you need to manage that. So it's the kind of thing where I knew I was coming from a family with diabetic, but you get so busy, and especially as Black men, we don't take as good care of ourselves as we should on a regular basis. But it was a real eye opener for me, and as a result, I've become very involved and interested in the healthcare of minorities and Black folks. Especially even in my family, I have brothers who are diabetic, and I find myself now trying to help them manage their diabetic syndrome, so they occasionally fall into. So it's been a real eye opener. It's been a real eye opener, and struggle on it. The only thing I want to say in conclusion is that we've got to keep this going. We've got to keep this situation, this informational thing going to the community. We can never expect to deal with this situation in 1 or 2 or 3 or 4 or 5 settings. This is the kind of information, and brother Andrisse, you are the kind of resource people that we need to be able to rely on, to count on, to spread the word and help us spread the word, and use your knowledge and your experience to help educate as many people as we can, because that's the only way that we're going to be able to address this situation in any significant manner. It's by continuing to do these things. The Bible tells us, don't get weary in well-doing. And that's what we got to continue to keep that concept in our head. We got to continue to do what we have to do to educate people along the way. And if we can save one person, just one person, man, then our living will not be in vain. Our efforts will not be in vain. So I just thank you, brother, for your sacrifice. I thank my brother Leon for pulling all this together. And I just pray that we can continue to do the work of the good Lord and educating our people and bringing our people around to a better healthcare scenario for themselves.
Thank you, Anthony. Thank you very much. That's the co-chair of the, actually vice chair, interim vice chair of the board of directors of AADA. And I guess our dear friend Tanir has something to say. We're closing this out. Thank you very much, Anthony. And obviously, thank you very much, Dr. Stan Andrisse, for assisting us. But before you leave, Doc, Brother Tanir, you have some closing comments or thoughts?
Yeah.
I just want to say one quick thing before you start. I just want to give big kudos to Brother Otis and the brothers here at the O'Aces Barbershop. They've been hanging in here. They're ready to close now, but they're giving me a couple of seconds to get out of here. But we could not have done this without Brother Otis and his family and staff being gracious enough to give us the space and the time in their place, a historical place. This place is a historical barbershop. It's been in the Black community for over 30 some odd years. And so it's a real privilege and an honor to be here. And I just thank God for them and their sacrifice, and hope that the good Lord blesses them, continues to bless them with much more economic finance and prosperity.
Thank you, Anthony.
Thank you, brothers.
Thank you. Thank you, everybody. Thank you, Doctor. Thank you, Rock. Thank you, Anthony. Thank you for everyone who came on. We got 1 minute left. Dr. Andrisse, is there one key takeaway that you have for everyone that's on Zoom and our live before we conclude?
I didn't mention it much, but I think I encourage you to pick up a copy of my book, So the book's title is it's from prison cells to PhD. It is never too late to do good. But what I really want to leave you with is that it is never too late to do good. So the concept of it's never too late to do good is around if you had interaction with the criminal legal system. But I think it applies to a lot of different things. And when we think about our health, it's never too late to make that change and start being healthy and start this new lifestyle, start this new diet plan, start this new way of seeing your well-being. So I would say it's never too late to do good is what I want to leave you with.
Very good.
Yes.
Wow.
Thank
Thank
you.
you so very much. That's
Thank you,
amazing.
Thank you, Dr. Andrisse. Thank you, Rock. Thank you, Mr. Otis Stills and the O'Aces Barbershop team for hosting the watch party in Roxbury, Massachusetts. Thank you to the Massachusetts Executive Office of Housing and Economic Development for funding tonight's event. And thank you to everyone who joined us this evening. Please join AADA on the 31st of this month at 7 p.m. Eastern, just to talk a little bit about what Anthony was talking about. We are continuing. We aren't ending here with additional workshops. Also, please follow us on Facebook, Instagram, and YouTube. If you have any questions, I'll still be on after. Have a wonderful night.
Dr. Stan, thank you. We're not recording anymore, are we?